Just want to let everyone know we went live to YouTube and we're going to go in broadcast mode now.
Thank you. And Michelle Michelle, can you make me co-host, please?
I don't think I have that power, but I will double check.
Okay, thanks.
I can do that from here.
Okay. Who is that?
Hi, my name is Kara. I'm one of the new administrative assistants helping with Zoom.
Okay. Hi, Kara.
Okay, Mirta, I made you co-host.
Thank you.
Mirta, I'm ready. This is Michelle. I'm ready whenever you are.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll give it one more minute and then we can get going. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm going to call the Public Works Committee to order. If we can put the public participation information on the screen, that would be great. In the meantime, yes, thank you. In the meantime, I'm going to see who's in attendance. Do we have Stacy Anderson? I don't see Stacy yet. Becerra is present. Contos?
Yes.
Present, okay. Harp?
Present.
Hess?
Present.
Jones?
Present.
Merritt? I don't see Julie yet. Cheryl will be absent for Public Works. Vasika?
Present.
Von Lossberg?
Present.
And West. I don't see Heidi yet.
Did you get me, Mirta?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jesse. Jesse's here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I'm also here.
Okay. Anderson is present. Okay, so very quickly, we continue to meet virtually, and you can now register to participate in the committee meetings. We are doing this via webinar, and the information is on the screen, but I'll just say it out loud. It's www.missoulapublicmeetings.com or https missoula-mt.zoom.us and your calendar list. documents can be found on our website as well, ci.missoula.mt.us/webcasts. And we will now move to, here's additional information. You can always provide public comment by leaving a voicemail. You can call 406-552-6012. You can email council@ci.missoula.mt.us. And information for how to participate is on the screen and also available on our website. So we have minutes to approve from August 5th. Are there any changes or amendments to the minutes? Okay, see none, those would stand approved. I will open it for public comment on anything on our agenda or in general. I am checking to see if anyone has raised a hand or wants to provide public comment. I don't see anyone, so we will move to our first item and only item on the agenda for today. And that is a resolution amending the engineering fee schedule to remove the stormwater pollution prevention program and erosion control permits and to establish the stormwater permit. And Tracy Campbell is here to present.
Hi, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, great. So yes, Tracy Campbell. I am the Regulatory Compliance Manager with the Public Works Stormwater Utility. So I will go ahead and see if I can share my screen with you. I have a small presentation outlining the permits here. Okay. Okay, can everyone see that okay now? Thumbs up?
Yep.
Oh, perfect, thank you. Let me minimize this here. You guys don't need to see all that, I suppose, I don't know. So what we're proposing here is a revised stormwater permit and then a new drywall approval. So we are replacing the existing stormwater pollution prevention plan, or a SWIP, local SWIP permit, and the erosion control permit with what we are calling simply a stormwater permit. The existing permits cover 1 acre of disturbance or a change in grade of 3 feet or more. And so that part is not changing with the new permit. What is changing is that we are lowering the threshold of disturbance to 2,500 square feet. The amount for the permits has been between $310 and $527, and it was based on the area of disturbance. The new permits will range from $209 to $903 and are based on multiple factors such as area of disturbance, type of development, and site conditions. We're also proposing a new drywall approval, which would cost $129, and that would be obtained under an excavation permit. The reason why we are revising the existing permit and adding a new permit is to comply with the conditions in the city's general permit for stormwater discharges, which is called our MS4 permit. Essentially, it's for Clean Water Act compliance. The Clean Water Act is a federal regulation that is administered by the Montana Department of Environmental Quality under the authority of the EPA. The drywall installations and drywalls in general are under the regulatory arm of the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is actually administered by the EPA. So DEQ doesn't really have regulatory authority over the drywalls. That's more a different regulation. For our MS4 permit, we have multiple conditions that we are required to meet in order to come into compliance with it. These just list kind of the general main points that we need to comply with. So these new permits address our minimum control measures 4 and 5 for construction site stormwater management, and then also for post-construction stormwater management. This is our permitting workflow, so you can kind of get an idea of how we're going to implement this within the existing permitting software within Excella. We've been working with permitting division. They've been working very hard to do a lot of back-end development work. We still have a little bit more to do, but we've come a really long way with getting these new permits within the system. The construction permit side starts with 3 tiers. The first tier, and I'll describe this a little bit more detail on another page. This kind of gives you a little bit of an overview of how the workflow is going to go. The tier 1 is for primarily it'll be single family duplex residential. That's $209. Tier 2 is for multifamily commercial industrial. And both of these tiers are for sites under an acre. Tier 2 is $258. Tier 3 would be similar to what we have now, which is all disturbance that's greater than or equal to an acre, and that's $516. A SWIP will still be required, or a state SWIP, state documentation showing that there's compliance with the state construction general permit. So that's real similar to what we have now. With those submittals, we do a site evaluation form, and that is what it would trigger whether or not the applicant needs to submit a stormwater management site plan for post-construction. So that would be things like a storm drainage report showing what's going to be on site after everything's completed, making sure that that infrastructure is going to comply with the conditions of our permit for clean water compliance, managing for water quality, and also being adequately sized. So those that fall into the low category on the left there would not need to submit a stormwater management site plan. So those medium high priority sites based on our site evaluation form for construction then would trigger whether or not they submit that plan, and then that would bring them into this post-construction type of permit. And with those, we use another form to determine how often we need to inspect those, or how often the city would need to inspect those. The low to medium priority sites would be an additional $258. Those would require a self-inspection by the owner and a 5-year inspection by the city. And then the high priority sites would be $387 inspected annually by the city. And all of those sites that trigger the post-construction would have to schedule a 5-year renewal of that permit. The purpose is to ensure that those facilities are functioning as designed. Up in the right corner, it's much simpler. The drywall approval is under an existing excavation permit, so just nested within there, and it'll be required for new, reconditioned, and closed drywalls. The stormwater permit is going to regulate smaller project sites. 2,500 square feet of disturbance is the trigger that we chose, with multiple internal meetings as well as externally in conversations with other MS4s throughout the state. We thought that that was an adequate size to kind of capture some of the single family home development where we see a lot of track off, like this picture shows, where there's just not the best management practices in place to limit sediment running off site, or just good housekeeping in general. There's also a bit of a DEQ loophole where even though you might have a large site that's over an acre and it's covered by DEQ SWIP, once those individual lots are sold off, the owner of that master SWIP can then choose to drop off those lots from their master SWIP, so then they're not covered anymore. And so local municipalities have had to kind of find a way to regulate those sites, and this is how they're doing it. So the stormwater permit requires an erosion control site plan, which shows our best management practices, our BMPs, things like it can be practices in the sense that operations, it's street sweeping, it's picking up garbage, just general things like that. It can also be structural BMPs, such as silt fences or inlet protection, things that are keeping the site clean, preventing erosion. Vegetated buffer is probably the best one, and we'd love to, talking with contractors, love to see more just retaining the vegetation rather than doing what they call mass grading, where they clear the whole site. Rather, we'd like to see them keep some more vegetation around these sites to keep them a little bit, be able to protect waterways and prevent pollution. That's the end goal here. So depending on the priority of the site, it might require a stormwater management site plan for post-construction. So anything that stays in the ground or on site after construction is complete. So back to the erosion control site plan, kind of already described this within the flow chart, but here we have our different tiers. Kind of had to find a way to break it out depending on how much time it was anticipated staff would be spending on reviewing different types of projects. So we broke them out into 3 tiers. And here they are again, tier 1, $209, mostly single family duplex residential. Tier 2, $258, multifamily commercial industrial. And tier 3, $516 for all sites that would require a state SWIP. So the stormwater management site plan for low and medium priority sites, and that is actually based on the post-construction inspection frequency determination. And all of these things, a lot of what I'm talking about are these inspection frequency determinations or site evaluation forms, it's all tied to the permit language and what we need to be doing for compliance. So low to medium priority sites would be $258, high priority sites, $387. So post-construction, this is actually the Subaru site, which was great. They did a really great job with their BMPs. You see a straw wattle across here. And then, so that would be a temporary BMP for erosion control or sediment prevention. And then you see their permanent structures there on the bottom within that basin. And these permits are renewed every 5 years. The drywall approval will cost $129. It's going to be required for new, reconditioned, and closed dry wells. As I mentioned, dry wells are regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And in general, in Missoula, we haven't really, we're doing great now. We're doing a lot better now. I'm in communication with EPA. But initially, I think probably about a year ago, they had less than 100 of our dry wells in their inventory. And we are required by federal law to submit an inventory form to EPA. Not just us, anyone that installs one, or contractors. There's some contractors that know. For instance, I believe it was like the Costco site, Bureau of Land Management. There were a couple, U.S. Forest Service, a couple bigger agencies that had submitted their inventories to EPA because they know that that's what's required. So those are the only ones EPA had in their inventory. But as you might know, we have thousands and thousands of dry wells within the city that are just, within the right of way even, and many more on private property. So the drywall approval is really a way of being better at keeping up an inventory. So last year I submitted our inventory to EPA, and basically in the form of a spreadsheet. We couldn't do an inventory form for thousands of dry wells, so we submitted a Excel sheet with lat longs. So we're keeping them up to date, so we are in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act and getting those dry wells inventory. But here on forward, we need a way of better tracking, not just ones within the right of way, but also ones on private property. And here is our lovely urban water life cycle. And that's it. So happy to take questions.
Thank you, Tracy. And also I wanted to point out that with in the agenda, there are links to other documents, including the proposed fee changes. So if you want to take a closer look at those are included with in the agenda. I have Julie Merritt with a question, and then Heather.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. That it is good to know that we're getting a little better handle on the stormwater issues. You mentioned that you're lowering the threshold of needing one of these permits to 2,500 square feet. What are you lowering it from? What was the value before?
1 acre.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. Can I have a follow-up, Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
So what projects will be affected as far as projects that are currently in the works that might already be under review? Are those going to be subject to these new permit conditions or conditions, but situation?
You know, it's a good question because we're still working with our permitting division on, you know, getting that up and running within Excella. So I know the drywall approval has been pretty simple, and that's going to be ready to roll. And I think anything, you know, that comes in after the fees become final or approved, that can start pretty soon. And that would, I mean, I imagine anything that goes in for an excavation permit or anything that is going to be going for building permits and has that within the plans, those would be required at that point. So I'm thinking, yeah, how it works in the process. It's a good question. I'm not in the permitting division, so I'm not sure how that usually works. You know, if some projects are grandfathered, but I'm imagining we're putting out word. We've got a letter going out to contractors in the community, doing a close to hopefully a 30-day notice and letting them know that these are coming. So any new permits coming in after the fees are approved, I'm thinking those ones would be subject to this.
But in terms of process, I think first we need to, this would have to go before before City Council on, we're setting a public hearing on the 14th of September. So after that, I forget how long the period for enactment of that resolution would be, you know, kicks the starting time for whatever new projects come in that would be affected by the changes.
Yeah, I think someone.
What I'm hoping, I guess what I was looking for is projects that maybe are not at the point of asking for building permits yet, but that are already in the planning stages. This has a big effect on what that planning entails. Can we get some clarity around what, if any, projects that are currently in the planning process will be affected by these changes, and to what degree? So if we could get some clarity on that, I would appreciate it.
Yep, make a note. That's a good point. Thanks.
And then can I have one follow-up real quick?
Sure.
On the slide with that you had your nice flow chart, the workflow on there. Can you give us maybe a little bit of an idea of what would cause a site to be designated as either low, medium, or high priority?
Yes, so I know it's a little bit complicated. So there's two different types of priority ranking. So we're ranking the construction site. So there are two different tracks of construction, post-construction. So there's low, medium, high based on construction using a site evaluation form. And then depending on that priority, then it triggers the post-construction. So low, medium, so the priority ranks that you're referring to, are you talking construction or post-construction?
Yeah, and I guess what I'm trying to understand is what characteristics would cause a project to fall into one of those different categories.
Okay, so for construction, it would be, we have a site evaluation form, so I can share all of those too, if you'd like to see those. So that is based on proximity, and the factors within that are also within the permit as to how we need to rank and prioritize sites. And so based on proximity to an impaired water body, based on slope, various factors, I think we've got about 10 different things in there that ranks a site
Okay.
for construction.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions that I had.
Okay, I have Heather and then Brian.
Thanks. Tracy, I know as a regulatory compliance officer, I know this is never a lot of fun, but I'm so glad that you're here for our city to help hopefully kind of make some sense of things. So one of the things that sticks out at me is that we go from 1 acre, which is actually 43,560 square feet, down to 2,500 square feet of disturbance. And that's a big, sizable chunk that all of a sudden we now have more projects that are going to be charged these particular fees. And I'm not discounting that we don't need them, but I just want to make sure I understand the rationale behind the pricing side of it. And so so in terms of making sure that there's a value that's associated with this, how are those fees determined to be able to rate those at those particular levels?
So we can probably go back to this sheet here.
Okay.
If you can see that. So this table is how we determined the fees, and it was based on a loaded rate of $32.25 an hour for engineering permit tech. And
You said
also
$32.50?
adding,
Okay.
for $32.25 an hour.
Okay.
A loaded rate. And so then looking at engineering permit tech, and then also adding an hour and a half for some admin and Excel time, which is working within our permitting database software, and then also adding time for GIS and recording. And so that's how we came up, and so we estimated hours, and so it was based on how many hours we thought would be spent implementing these different rankings of permits as to how much we were going to charge.
Okay, so ultimately what we're doing is making sure that we cover the costs of our employees' time, similar to any of service contractor who shows up to do work, whether they're a plumber or electrician, something along those lines. Whether they do the work or not, I know I get charged when they show up, no matter how little time they spend. So I appreciate understanding that it's based upon their time. Another question I have is in regards to the dry wells. So I guess I'm a little confused as to, are we having to charge $129 for every single dry well, even if they are old ones or existing ones, I should say? Or is this just for going forward for new ones going in?
Right, going forward. So let's say we have a site and maybe it's an older site. There's 3 dry wells, but they want to do new construction on them. Well, they need to have a permit showing, where the new ones are going to go. And then that way we have a little bit of backing in order to be able to inspect them when they're installed, to ensure they're being installed correctly, and we'll be able to function as they're designed to function. And then also be able to do the inventory and update our GIS database and also submit that inventory. In the end, anything on city property and within city right of way, we will be submitting that inventory to the EPA. Anything on private property, it will still be the responsibility of the private contractors to submit that inventory to EPA.
Okay, thank you very much.
Brian.
Thanks. I was just following up. Julie made a good point about the review thing, and I think you guys all covered it, but just to be super explicit, as part of the presentation for the public hearing, we should have that information so that there's no ambiguity about implementation date and applicability to projects in review and those sorts of questions. and I think you basically have already said that, but I thought it was worth highlighting again. And I also was wondering if maybe picking up on the topic about the change in the square footage, if it might merit a picture that puts in context the size of what it was versus the word description of the area is one thing, but if we had those two areas relative to each other at some scale, it might help put it in context better. Just a suggestion.
It's a good idea.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks. I think that implementing this new measure will help us better track and report, and therefore be in better compliance with DEQ regulations. So I'm supportive of this. I also think that as we continue to develop at the rate that we're seeing development, it's important that we have ways to mitigate the impact of that development. And I think this will get us there. Tracy, I'm not seeing this is an informational item right now. I see that action needs to be taken on the 17th, and then the public hearing is scheduled for the 14th. Am I correct with that assumption, or do we need a motion? Brian?
You're asking.
Mirta, I think I noticed, I think it was a little confusing in the referral, or it doesn't appear in the agenda, but in the referral, I think it looks like we need a motion for setting the public hearing on the 14th, and I'm happy to make that motion to set a public hearing on the 14th.
Great, thank you. That's what I thought, but I wasn't tracking. It wasn't clear. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Let's open it very quickly for public comment on this motion to set a public hearing on September 14th. And I am not seeing any attendees or anyone trying to make public comment on this item. So if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Mirta, it's going to take me a second because there's no motion. I don't have a vote option. So 2 seconds and let me come up with a solution.
Sure. Michelle, if it helps, I can just go through the roll and count the ayes and nays or abstentions.
I think we're almost there.
Okay.
No, I can go down here. Okay, that'll still make you give you something to vote on. Now you should have. And then you can edit the gobbledygook.
Okay. Thanks, Marty. You gotta be kidding. Okay. Anderson,
Yes.
Becerra,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Merritt,
Yes.
Ramos,
Yes.
Basika,
Yes.
Van Lossberg,
Yes.
that's 10 yes.
Okay. Thank you. And this will be on our consent agenda to set the public hearing for September 14th. Thank you, Tracy. And that was the only item on our agenda for today. So we would be adjourned. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.